Welcome to the Town Hall Get to Know show. We have a very special guest this evening. I've been looking forward to this broadcast for some time, and I have Miss Kelley Gunter in the studio with us today. This is going to be a must watch, riveting story about overcoming an eating disorder, about losing 243 pounds. It's about sexual abuse as well as mental abuse, as well as using addictions as a coping mechanism. But the important factor here is this is an overcomer story. This is about overcoming the addictions and being able to go on and enjoy everyday life. It's going to be a fabulous show. Stick with us, please. Stay to the end. Don't change the channel. We want to thank all of our viewers, those that are watching on Roku and Amazon Fire, Apple or Android. If you're watching on Facebook, you can put in comments. If you have a thought or a question for Kelley, feel free to put that into the comments and we'll address as many as we can of those. We want to thank everybody, like I said, for joining us this evening. It's going to be a great show. Whether you grappled with personal body images or yo-yo dieting in the past, lifelong weight issues, or even morbid obesity, you'll find a personal inspiration through Kelley's compelling personal story of pain, struggle, and ultimately personal triumph. And we're so proud of her. For those contemplating a bariatric surgery, Kelley's been through that, and she offers some guidance and words of wisdom and personal examples from beginning to end. She is a internationally acclaimed speaker, life coach, number one best-selling author of the compelling memoir, You Have Such a Pretty Face. And she describes herself as a survivor, an emotional warrior, a connoisseur of comfort food. We want to talk about that because I was reading up about how I think she knows how to cook food really well. And so that's exciting. Who doesn't like great comfort food, right? It's all about moderation, folks, right? And so, really, without further ado, let's go ahead and bring her in. Make sure that if you're watching on Facebook or you're checking it out on YouTube when we get it up there, share the video out. Tell your friends about this. We appreciate that. So let's give Kelley a warm town hall welcome.
Hi.
Hello and welcome to the Town Hall Get to Know show. So we're going to get to know you tonight, Kelley.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
I am as well. We really appreciate and we're honored that you're here and you're going to share your story. Um, Maybe let's just start a little bit about just because there's a lot to your bio. I didn't tell all of it. Maybe you just tell a little bit about that, and then we'll go into some questions that I have as well.
Okay. Well, like you said, I speak all over. My story has always taken a life of its own. I was interviewed by a reporter from London, and then overseas, especially, it just takes on its own energy. And then someone messages me on social media and says, "You're on the cover of People magazine in South Africa." And I'm like, what? I mean, so it just takes a life of its own, and they can grab your story and publish it wherever they want over there. And so I was just constantly being messaged by people, "Oh, you're on Australian national news and you're trending in London." And I just was like, how? And so I think that people find it compelling to see someone who has struggled, who has been through really the unthinkable and been able to still come out of it and find their way back to the light.
I love the way you say that, find their way to the light, because there is light in darkness, isn't there, Kelley?
There is, and I say it all the time, and I will continue to say it to people. If you feel like you are trapped in the darkness and that you cannot get out, I promise you, if you look, you will see my footprints there. And if I can be led out of that darkness by a power greater than me and by so many wonderful people who were sent to help me, and I believe that with all I have, if I can be let out of there, then you can as well. And so I'm always like, I'm standing over here, I'm looking for you, I'm shining my light, and I'm trying to let you know that you can escape it as well.
Well, that's why you're on this show too, Kelley, is because the Town Hall Get to Know is about people like yourself who are influential and they're making a positive impact in society. and you have made a worldwide impact with your story.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
It's really I think the most powerful thing that I've learned is my story's not about me. And when we can really embrace that and internalize that truth and get it and understand it at the core of who we are, then I think that's when we are able to make a difference. You know, my story is about hope and light and the beautiful grace that saved my life. And that's what my story is about.
And, one of the things that I wanted to know, I got several really great questions here, folks, and just stick with us if you're just joining this broadcast, because we're going to be going over some great information here. And we're going to, you might know somebody that's struggling with an addiction. And, all addictions really break back to one thing. Kelly's going to talk about that. So we're going to give you some advice too, as well. It's going to be an opportunity to learn, to grow, and maybe to help yourself or someone that you might know. Because Kelley is there. She is a coach. And so you can reach out to her. We'll give you that information as well. But how does it feel? Because you're being transparent about your story. And there can be a lot of fear involved in sharing the truth with other people because of their judgment of you. Maybe you can share about how that feels for you, and how you decided that it's okay to share your story.
Well, I think that's always been a huge factor in my life. And the shame of being sexually abused. Sexual abuse just carries a super significant shame with it that just strangles the life and the hope out of people. So that shame controlled me, and the comrade of that shame is silence. So the two go together. They're intricately connected. And what we're afraid to speak of for many reasons, from the time we're children until we're older, as far as sexual abuse is concerned, that silence nearly destroyed my life. I kept those secrets for 40 years. And so that unhealed trauma that was never disclosed or allowed to heal, just it sat in the control room of my soul, silently dictating all of my life's calamities. And we can't heal what we don't acknowledge. And so initially, when I first wrote my book, I had one sentence in the book that just said, I was abused as a child. That was it. No details, no specific words as to exactly what happened or anything. And I just knew that it wasn't genuine, but it's a process. Being able to really speak your truth and be comfortable with that truth is a process. And so after a couple of weeks, I thought I need to put more in there. And currently, the book only has about 3 paragraphs about the abuse, because it's still at that point. I wrote the book in 2017. I wasn't where I am today. And so it was a gradual process. And learning, what finally happened was I promised God on a very, very dark day. I said, if you will get me through this, I will tell my truth. I will share my story with the world, but I can't survive this without you. And I need you to give me the strength. I need you to somehow give me the ability to live through this, because the darkness and everything I was going through was incredibly overwhelming. And I just finally was literally on my knees, just begging, because I didn't want to live anymore. And so to be able to say, if you get me through this, I will tell my story. And that is what got me to the point that I said, okay. And that's been like a 3-year process at this point.
And it's a growing and evolving story, and I know how that works, because we kind of come from the same thing in many ways, maybe not the same experiences, but the same feelings and the addictions, and being able to overcome it. And I know for me that coming out was in my first co-author, and it was like, yeah, it's evolved a lot since then. Now, you were talking about the fact, now that book, correct me if I'm wrong, you have such a pretty face. That went to #1, did it not? Or number one?
Right. Recently, it was #1 for almost 2 weeks on Amazon and the Kindle version, and in several different categories. And I just think the thing about the book is it's not just a story about weight loss. The subtitle says a memoir of trauma, hope, and the joy that follows survival. And so it does talk about my 243-pound weight loss, but it also talks about the trauma that caused me to use food as comfort in the first place, going into treatment for the numerous addictions, all of the self-destruction in my life. And so it talks about all of that. And then ultimately, the healing journey that I took to get to a place of developing self-worth and hope and faith.
So just tell the viewers, how long were you really suffering with the weight situation and maybe any other addictions? Was this something that started early in your life?
Well, what happened was, as a result of the sexual abuse that I suffered from the time I was 7 until I was 14 in my own home, so it was a daily situation, I used food as comfort. So by the time I was in my early 20s, I weighed 391 pounds. So I stayed that way for nearly 2 decades. And so that's when I decided to have weight loss surgery. And here's the thing, I lost the weight, I had the extra skin removed, but what I didn't do was heal the pain that caused me to use food as comfort in the first place. So then I developed cross addiction after cross addiction after cross addiction. And that's the thing. I spoke recently at the Super Saturday Recovery Summit, which is a global recovery event at the In the Rooms platform, which has, I think, about 700,000 people in it. And people who have weight loss surgery are at a much, much higher risk of developing addictions afterwards because of that exact reason. And a lot of people don't realize it, or people may realize it, but they don't think it will happen to them. You know, they think, oh, I can lose this weight and I won't have those issues. And so all of those separate cross addictions are finally what brought me to my knees. And so, you know, life isn't pretty and life isn't easy. And there are times that life is pretty and there are times that life is easy. And I always like to use that quotation, this too shall pass. People always like to use that when they think of something difficult and hard and painful, but it applies to everything. It applies to good times. It applies to bad times, and why we have to be able to appreciate our blessings and our good times when we have them, the times with the people we love and the happy events, because eventually that will pass too.
And that's the beauty of it. It will pass. You said a couple of things that I think that are really important. And we'll get to the spiritual connection, because you said you asked God for help, and God was willing to, which he always does if we ask, help us through this stuff. But you fixed the quote issue with physically speaking, but you hadn't healed it mentally,
right,
and emotionally. So what did you have to do then to fix yourself emotionally?
Well, I went into treatment 5 years ago, and I've been sober now for 5 years. And so going into treatment and allowing, and initially when I went into treatment, I did not disclose the abuse still. That's how powerful that shame is. I had lost everything. I'd lost everything I had. I had a company that I ran for 13 years that I had founded and ran. I lost everything. My last addiction, a gambling addiction, I misused monies from that business related to a gambling addiction. I was charged with theft and convicted of theft related to that business. I lost my business, my career, my home, all of our belongings, my cars, everything we had, every person I loved, my entire family, everything. And it was just my son and I had one friend who stuck by me, and that was it. And so I went into treatment at that point, and still, having lost all of those things, I wasn't going to disclose the abuse. That's how powerful that shame is. And so I had nothing left to lose, and I wasn't going to do it. And so when I went into treatment after several days, I finally disclosed the trauma. They were able to, I was there. Like, it wasn't go for an hour to counseling. I went to Sedona, Arizona, and went into treatment. And eventually, they broke me down to the point that I finally disclosed it. And that is when my healing began, because we can't heal what we don't acknowledge.
So yes, that's an important factor. You have to accept it and take ownership of our experiences.
Right.
And so part of the healing was certainly releasing that, well, sharing it, right, with others.
Well,
And
right.
yeah,
Eventually. I mean,
yeah,
it's a very slow process to share trauma that
yeah,
I kept secret forever.
okay.
So, first I had to begin working through that trauma. I had to deal with flashbacks and intrusive thoughts and, the nightmares, night terrors, and working through all of that and trying to process it. I told the people closest to me, which at that point weren't many because everyone had lost, had left my life. And that's the thing. Many, many people were caught in the crossfire of my addiction. And that's
Mhm.
one of the ugly truths of addiction. We lose a lot of people. We lose a lot of things. It happens. And those people have every right to leave if they want to. And so eventually I shared it slowly. And again, never thinking, I never wanted to be a speaker. And this is God's hand in my life, because when I had my business, I would pay someone else to speak for me because speaking was something I just never wanted to do. And I wanted to be a writer. I wanted to hide out in my house, never face the world again, write books and write blogs and just disappear. And then God had a different idea. And so I know it was God because I love it. I mean, I speak to hundreds of people at a time, and it just thrives. It just is my energy. It's my fuel. And I love it because I know what it feels like to be in the darkness. And so I know how that feels. And I just feel like that's why I'm here.
Now you mentioned, of course, that you were a writer. Now that's something you've been doing most of your life, right?
Well, actually, I went to college for broadcast journalism. And within a year, I'd switched to social work. And so, no, I mean, I came out of school, I went to grad school, got my master's in clinical counseling. And then I wrote for a couple of newspapers just on the side. But what I did was be a therapist my entire career, and ultimately opening my own business. And so writing was my passion, and writing was something I always wanted to do, but I didn't think I could make a living doing it. So I did not do that my entire career. No, not at all. Not until I wrote "You Have Such a Pretty Face."
Okay. But okay, so now I understand that. But writing is something that you were passionate about, though. You decided,
Absolutely.
yes, this is
I was
important.
the Yeah, I was the editor of my high school newspaper. And like I said, I went to college for broadcast journalism. But once I got there, I always had professors who said, "Oh my gosh, you should write for Hallmark cards," those kind of things. But I sort of ran from that. I thought, oh, that's not really for me. I need to do something different. And, I think God gives us gifts, and ultimately we can run from them. But if it's what we're meant to do, then eventually it's going to happen.
So what was the moment that you had this epiphany that you really wanted to try and change your life, and then took action to do that? Was that 5 years ago when you decided, I'm gonna go and get recovery? Was that the epiphany moment, or had it happened previously?
Um, well, getting arrested in front of all of your neighbors is a harsh thing to go through. Being on the front page of every paper, being on the news, all of that is hard. I wanted to heal, but the thing was, even I didn't think my trauma was the root of it. I thought, what's wrong with me? Like, why? I was in that blur of addiction and
Mhm.
unhealed trauma. Children who are abused in their childhood, their brain grows and forms differently than children who are not. So if you take an MRI scan of an adult who was abused or had some type of trauma in their childhood and compare it of their brain and compare that with an adult who didn't have that trauma, their brains are very different. And the areas that are affected are the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala, which are the areas that control judgmental thinking or like judgment, consequential thinking, the fight, flight, or freeze response, impulsivity. But those are areas of our brain that we can reconfigure so we can heal. But I lacked those things. I had terrible judgment. I didn't have that consequential thinking. If this, then that. I was very impulsive. I was just all over the place. I was a hot mess. But I never thought, oh, That's from my trauma. I mean, I knew the trauma existed, obviously. I lived it for 7 years of my life. And even when the abuse ends, the trauma doesn't.
Right.
So, but I just always thought I'm not a victim anymore, but I never dealt with it. So the one thing I say to people a lot is food was my Band-Aid. I needed to look at the wound.
Yes.
So when I had weight loss surgery, I took off my Band-Aid but I still had my wound. So I got new Band-Aids because I didn't treat the wound. And so yes, it's very hard, but I think my true epiphany, I was in so much pain, and you have to understand, I'd lost everything. I had no career. I had no income. I had no family. I had nothing. I'm trying to deal with PTSD. I'm dealing with night terrors and flashbacks and intrusive thoughts. I'm dealing with a court case that went on and on. I didn't get charged for almost 3 years after all of this had happened.
Oh.
And so that just re-triggered all of my trauma that I was trying to work through. But yet I knew I need to stand up and take responsibility for this. I pled guilty because I knew I made those mistakes. And part of sobriety is taking your responsibility for that and being accountable for that. But that didn't make it easy. And so it was difficult, and it was very hard because there are always going to be people who want to throw out your mistakes at you. And that's part of recovery. There will always be the people who say, oh, I mean, I never had an issue with alcohol. One of the things I missed, there weren't many, but, I've heard people say, oh,
I know about that part.
Well, so, I've heard people talk about other people. Oh, you should have seen what a drunk he was. It's like, why? Why is that the first thing you bring up about somebody who's sober? What? But there will always be those people. And part of healthy living and recovery is knowing how to go forward in spite of the people who want to drag all your skeletons out of the closet. Skeletons for me that are on full display. I mean, I wrote a book about it. So
awesome.
yeah.
I mean, that's incredible. It really is that transparency, and that's a beautiful thing. And then with the power of God, I know that he gives us the strength to be able to do that and not worry about judgment. I want to go to this question though. Robin Lynn, thank you for your great comments here. If you want to go ahead and read that out though, do that for us here, Kelley. And there's a question there as well. I'll read it out for the viewers. I'm addicted to walking, says Robin. I know that it's positive, but I can't miss a day. I have numerous addictions as well. Therapy's helping her, but it seems like she goes from food to shopping to walking to gambling to texting and so on. Do we all have addictions, or is it just some people? And when do we know we have a true addiction?
Well, I would say we don't all have addictions, but a lot of people have addictions. And the way you know that you have an addiction is if it's interrupting part of your life, if you can't healthily function, and there are key areas of your life that are hurt by this, then you might want to look at, do I have an addiction? It could be a compulsive behavior versus an addiction, perhaps. But I think that all addiction has a core of shame and for something. And, shame can be a lot of different things. It doesn't have to be abuse, but we all have some type of pain, people who have addictions, I should say, and that fuels that need to escape it. And
yes, that's true. It does fuel it. And I know that on your website, you talk a lot about the fact that they're getting to that core source of the problem. And maybe you'll address that, the core source of why people have addictions and why they're coping with, in many cases, very unhealthy habits.
Yeah. I mean, you could have inherently low self-esteem. And so the addiction of choice makes you feel better. I used to do shopping as well. And I would spend all of this money and walk out of a store with all these bags and be like, woohoo, like it made me feel powerful to go in and spend and get whatever I wanted and not say, oh, I can't afford that or whatever. But then I'd get home and be like, oh my God, why did I spend so much money? And, then be taking stuff back or just really regretting it when I had to pay the bills and getting myself into lots of debt. And so I think you have to figure out what is the source of that pain. If not, you're going to keep jumping. I would overcome one addiction and jump to another one because I didn't deal with the source of it. There is a source, there is a core reason why you're doing what you're doing, and you have to figure out what that is. Everything you're doing is the Band-Aid. You have to deal with the wound, and everybody's wound is different.
That makes me think of Dr. Jenny, Band-Aids for boo-boos. And it's not about the Band-Aid. It is about the wound, and it's about treating that aspect of it. I'm just thinking, what if a person was willing to go public or even be transparent, say, about their story or their past tragedies and the things that they've experienced that might have led them into unhealthy habits? What or how would you feel that if they were to go public or be transparent and share about their situation, that would benefit them in the long run?
I think, and I've had a lot of people reach out to me on social media and some of my life coaching clients who say, I've tried to share my sexual abuse and I've had like terrible responses and people don't want to hear it. And I think the thing you have to be careful of is there are appropriate times and ways to share. And so everybody, if you're having dinner with the church book club, they aren't there to hear you talk about sexual abuse and trauma and addiction. And so people sometimes get it a little bit confused and think I'm telling my story everywhere I go because I'm not keeping it secret anymore. When someone has me over for dinner, hey, let's talk about my abuse. I talk about everything else like everyone else is talking about. So being able to find an appropriate avenue to share it, start a blog if you want to, write a book, have a podcast. There are ways, write articles, submit them. Not everybody wants to hear what everyone else's trauma was because it's triggering for other people. And so, so people, I think you just have to be careful about how you discuss it. And I'm not saying you have to be secretive. I'm just saying there are times to discuss it and times not to discuss it.
Well, what would the person do? Because I'm sure that and I know that I had the same situation happen to me, is that as a result of some of the poor choices that I had made, how do you deal with these people that I'll use the word haters because it's the term lately, but people come out of the woodwork at you, particularly when now you're turned your life around, you're willing to be honest about it. And these haters come at you trying to destroy you and tear you down. How do you deal with that?
That's part of recovery. That's part of recovery. And there will always be the people who want to bring up your past, and learning that those people have nothing to do with your future. They're not your source. I had to say to myself so many times, I'm not who they say I am. I'm who God says I am. And then I had to walk in that path and live in that way and be who I knew I was created to be. Because there will always be those people. There will be those people who want to show up where you speak and say, hey, she did this. Well, no kidding, I wrote a book about it. I've written many blogs about it. I've been interviewed internationally about it. But there will be those people who want to throw your past in your face. And that really says so much more about them than it ever says about you. What is being fed in them to spew hate at someone? I wrote a blog once that I haven't published yet, but I said there's two people in the world, right, where, oh, I saw this person, who she is, God. She was hurting. She was crying. She was devastated. And I told her how terrible she was. I beat her down more. I said all of her mistakes. And I told her that she would never overcome it. Are you proud of me, God? And then I said, there's another prayer where someone says, that person, God, the mistakes. I picked her up. I told her she could start again. I told her that you would help her heal and that she could move forward in you. Are you proud of me, God? Which person are you? That's the thing to ask yourself, because I don't believe that God wants anybody to beat up another person. We've all made mistakes, and making those mistakes, we take responsibility for them. And that was a big turning point for me because there was a while that I just thought, oh my gosh, I'm this terrible person. And I had to be able to really process and work through, I'm not my mistakes. And I've moved forward and I'm a different person and I'm a healed person. And the people who once knew me have no idea the person I am today. And I couldn't be the person I am today if any of those people stayed in my life. And that's not to say there's anything wrong with them, because there wasn't. They were wonderful people. But I couldn't have healed if I would have had any of them to lean on. If they could have been my buffer, if they would have been like, let me help you out of this, I wouldn't have gone through the refining fire I went through, and I wouldn't have healed. And so, and I feel like there was those people connected with broken me. There was something about broken me that connected with them. So healthy me, even though they're amazing people, we probably wouldn't connect in the same way.
That's a very good point. Very good point. Diane Carey, thank you for your question here. Do you recommend any books, Kelley, to help heal from abuse?
I recommend You Have Such a Pretty Face.
Of course. Yes, you have such a pretty face. Let's put that back up.
No,
Number one bestseller, folks.
there are so many powerful books out there.
There are.
For me, I lean toward the faith side of books,
Yes.
you know, and I know this is going to sound really, really generic. For me, the Bible was everything for me. I would pore over that Bible and just read scripture after scripture after scripture and look it up in different ways. But also, I love, oh my goodness, like there's literally so many books. I'm such a book nerd, and, you know, I'm always home reading books. And so, as far as eating goes, I saw someone posted and said, Dr. Nina Savelle Rockland,
Yes.
we do Binge Free Babes together, and she has a book titled The Binge Cure. And that's an amazing book to really help you zero in on your emotional eating and figure it out. There's a book by Lisa Turkhurst, and the title is, I might get it a little bit off, but it's like Forgiving What You Can't Forget, I think. And that's a Christian book. It's a really powerful book. And of course, I love The Gift of Imperfection by Brene Brown. That's an amazing book too. So I could be on here forever listing books. So
and the way, and we'll put it up here, is that you can actually go to Kelley's website and reach out to her that way. Send her an email, and that way you can ask her specifically, and she can get back to you. I'm sure she'll do that. You talked about the Bible. I'm just going to go ahead and read a Bible verse here, because this is also a healing. You said it helped you heal, and it does. The Bible gives us some clear direction as to how we can get better and how we can overcome the obstacles that we might have faced in our life, and to break through those barriers and move forward and get yourself to a point where you can enjoy everyday life. And so this is Philippians. It's actually 4:12 and 13. And it's, I can do all things through Christ, which strengthens me. Yes, because through Christ gives us the strength to be able to face this stuff. And I know for myself, I had to turn my life and my will over to the care of God, and admit that my life was totally unmanageable, so that I could get myself to the point that I'm at. And I know that I'm certain that you said it, that you did it too. It's really good.
It just so much scripture. I mean, God will fight for you. People, and for me, many times it required the gift of hindsight to see God's handprints everywhere. And I just said this last weekend when I did the sermon at church, how beautiful is it that we serve a God who doesn't need the gift of hindsight. You know, God's vision is 2020 for our future. And being able to say, you know, like my necklace, I know you can't see it from there, but it says, even if, and, you know, it's from the scripture with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, where, you know, even if God doesn't save us, we will not bow to your God. And I love that. But that's it's a deeper place in faith that a lot of people haven't gotten to. And I wasn't there yet. I was a very peripheral, I prayed to God, you know, I thanked him for stuff. But really being in the fire and really, really knowing, God, you're all I have. I'm only surviving because you're sending people who are helping me for no reason, people who just were good to me, inexplicably helping me. And I mean, I would go to bed crying, wake up in the middle of the night crying, start my day crying. Like before I ever got out of bed, I was in so much pain. And to be able to, in the middle of the darkness, I swear I could just hear him saying, focus on me, focus
Well,
on me.
you got a saying, and I do want to come back to Dr. Nina too, as well, because I'll say it quickly now because you mentioned it a minute ago, and there's a comment here that let me see right here that Robin mentioned that Dr. Nina Seville Rockland posted a book as well. You do a show with her, and I want everybody to know come March 1st. Pretty sure that's a Monday, as I recall. She'll be with us, and she'll be in the town hall as well. So I'm so excited and blessed
She's
to have that.
amazing.
Yeah.
She's
So we're like
amazing.
thrilled about that too. But tonight it's all about you and your story and what you have done. You've been sober for 5 years now. That's really awesome. Maybe we can talk about the things that you do to help you keep on that sober path and keep on a path of happiness and joy and having this peace and serenity, fruits of the spirit that God gives us when we're doing the right stuff. And so maybe you can help the viewers to give them an outline of this is how you do it. And if they apply these principles to their life, they can have it too.
Well, and I think it's an evolution, it's a process. And anyone who's been close to me would tell you there were many, many dark days. And then there were days that weren't quite as dark. And then healing is not linear, it's jagged. It's up and back and up and back. But absolutely 100% is I just had to rely on my faith. And I surrounded myself with people who were similar and people who also had that faith. So when I would have those bad days and I would be like, where is God? What is God doing? And I'm not praying anymore. I mean, I had those bad days. It would be a lie to say that I didn't. And there are so many people who could say I was on the receiving end of those phone calls from her. And, they'd say, well, I know you're not going to pray anymore, so I'll pray for you. Until you're ready to pray again, I'm going to pray for you. And, within a couple hours, I'd be praying again. I mean, and now, I couldn't go without it. But we have those moments. And I know God understands those moments.
Right.
He gets it. And so for me, I had to surround myself with people who not only believed in me and believed that, I could heal and I could get through it. I had to also make sure that those people were similar in faith as well, because that really, really helped my faith to grow and strengthen. And so that I could be a source of faith and hope for other people. Not everybody's going to be where we are at faith-wise. If the people who are my best friends today expected my faith to be at the same level they were, I wouldn't have them in my life. But I learned and I grew from having them in my life because they modeled to me what a Christian person does when they're in pain and in darkness. And I saw it. They said, we can't change what you have to go through, but you won't go through it alone because we will be beside you. And to see that play out over 5 years was just compelling.
Well, you made a good point, and I think it's important that we change people, places, and things, and surround ourselves with the people that we want to be like. And particularly, I think it's exceptional when you reach out to people that really are smarter and stronger and more centered than ourselves so that we can learn from them, correct?
Right. And I think that that's where transformation comes in. And I think that people learn just as much from transformation as they do from information. And because I know, and I've shared this story a lot, on one incredibly dark day, I was searching YouTube, just looking for someone who had been through something similar and had came out on the other side. And I found a lot of stories and testimonies of people who had gone through unthinkable nightmares and came out on the other side, but they hadn't made mistakes. And, they just had been victims of something horrendous. And so I couldn't find anybody who had been victims of something horrendous, but also as a result hadn't healed, had made a lot of mistakes, and still was able to come out of it. And that's the day that I told you about before, when I finally said, okay, God, Like if I need that kind of hope, if I want to see somebody who has as many imperfections as I've had, who's made mistakes like I've made, I need to see that. And so if you will get me through this, I will tell my story. Because there were just so many nights when I just prayed, begging, asking him to let me die, just begging him, please take me in my sleep. I don't want to live one more day. And he said no. He said no.
Well, and you've taken that one step further now. We were talking about that before the show. Because yes, when we're in the depth of our darkness, certainly suicide tends to want to become an option, and to, you know, end the pain.
Mhm.
Now, so you're gonna, pardon?
The enemy loves that. He loves to use the
Right.
darkness against you. You know,
Well, he wants us to do that.
right. And
Yeah.
my grandma always said to me, be careful when you pray, because remember, God's not the only one who hears your prayers. So, and I said this last weekend, do you think that the enemy heard that prayer, please just let me die, and was like, let me back off this girl? No, he's going to add more on. He's like, she's weak. She's falling apart. She's, you know, she's losing strength. Let me add more on her plate because I can get her that way. And so you have to be aware that a lot of that, like the attacks keep coming because he sees that you're weakening. And when I really became aware of that, like I am under attack. I am under attack.
Right.
That really helped me as well because it would end quickly as it started, it would end. And if I did the right things. And so, we feel that way. We get in those dark moments and the darkness will whisper lies to you. And that's what I just try to let everybody know. Like the thoughts you have in the darkness are not accurate. The darkness changes everything. It changes the ordinary into the ominous.
The ordinary into the ominous. Mm-hmm. That's a great statement. And you do have a saying. I'd like you to repeat that saying about when things get really tough and in these trying times, what you're saying to people.
Which are you talking about? What's on my website?
Talking about on your homepage of your website. You know, when the world says give up,
hope whispers, try it one more time. And you know, I have that in the prologue of my book. And because there were so many times I wanted to give up with so many things, with weight loss, with addiction, with healing. And so let's see, I see in this Jeremiah, I have loved you with everlasting love. I've drawn you with, yes. You know, there's just so much power in there. And it makes me, I was just talking to my son today. He had a surgeon's appointment and I said, you know, like, I just wish I would have had the powerful relationship with God that 20 years ago that I have today. And my son said, yeah, but you wouldn't have developed that relationship if there wasn't the destruction. And like, he's just true. I had to go through what I went through. And I think that I just feel that way. Sometimes our destiny comes calling. It just comes cloaked in destruction. And
it's interesting that you say that too, because I identify with that statement. That's how I found my purpose, was from my darkness. Absolutely, I did. What I was thinking was, if I can remember that thought now, because it came and went. You're just making so many points. My mind's running pretty quick here. So I wanted to talk about the fact that we do find our purpose from our pain. And I remember what I wanted to say. Thank you, Lord. Okay, because some people might wonder that they are put through some extremely terrible situations and abuse, like you were, and they go, why, God, why? Why are you doing this to me? What did I do to deserve that punishment? And I think that's a lot of times where people are going with it. They feel like, if there's a real God and he's this God of love, why am I being punished like this? Maybe you can address that aspect.
Yeah, I get that question a lot. How can you trust a God who let you be raped for 7 years? And I couldn't have survived that without God. And what I know is those 7 years, he was there. And the Bible never once says that we won't have to suffer. In fact, it says the exact opposite. But I know that that's not what people who are hurting want to hear, because that's, I think, a much deeper level faith that we can say, well, this is what the Bible says. But I believe there will always be a battle between good and evil on this planet. And because of that, there will be suffering. But if we take those broken pieces to God, he will turn them into something beautiful. And he will turn our suffering and our ashes into something beautiful. And I think anyone can say, yes, there's good and bad on the earth. There's good and evil. There's a battle taking place regularly. And so could God stop all of that? Of course he could. I believe he could if he wanted to. I mean, but we are here living out the earth. And because of that, there's good and bad. There's suffering taking place. The key to it is he will put us back together if we let him, but we have to believe. And I always say there's purpose in pain, but the substance that turns one into the other is faith. And I always tell people, here's peace and here's suffering, and the bridge that connects them is healing. And it's the same thing with faith. You can heal, but that doesn't mean you're going to have faith and that kind of peace that you can get. And so that's how because when I look back on my life, I can just see all the things that God did that let me know he was there. I see his handprints everywhere. Even when I was a little girl being abused, he sent things that at the time I couldn't see it. Why would God let that happen to me? Well, maybe it happened because God knew today I would speak out and try to reach survivors everywhere. There are 82 million adult survivors of sexual abuse in the United States today. 82 million. And statistics from the APA say that 90% of them have never disclosed their abuse to anybody. And I believe those statistics because when I speak, I get people lined up just wanting to say, me too. I get messages from people I had a lady message me on social media after I spoke one night, and she said, I've been married to my best friend for 34 years, and I've never told him or anyone else that I was sexually abused. And she said, thank you for sharing your story, because you sharing yours gave me the courage to share mine with you. She said, I probably will never tell him or anyone else, but at least it's off my soul. So you've been married to your best friend for 34 years, and you can't tell him that you were a victim. That's how powerful that shame is. I had a lady at a speaking event come up to me who was 85, and she said, I've never told anybody, but it was my dad. 85 years old and never told a soul. We don't have to bear that burden alone. We are not alone. And, there are so many people who are willing to fight for you and believe you and hold you up and pray for you and just say, I will fight for you. And 82 million adult survivors, and 90% of them, I'm no mathematician, but that's a lot. 90% of them have never disclosed it. And so we look at people, we say, why does he cheat on his wife? Why does she do cocaine? Why does she sleep around? Why is he doing drugs? Why does she date losers? All these things, I have coaching clients who say to me, oh, Kelley, I have relationship issues. Maybe you do, or maybe you have childhood issues presenting as relationship issues and, unresolved issues from your childhood. And we never stop to think, maybe that person has some unhealed trauma, and even they don't know why they're doing what they're doing.
What would be the best advice that you could give to a listener that might be suffering and might be being silent and had never told anybody, or anybody that is dealing with addiction, period? What advice would you give to them so that they can start enjoying their life?
I mean, you have to heal. And part of healing is acknowledging the abuse. And you don't have to write about it. You don't even have to share it with anybody in the world except someone. There are so many free platforms. RAINN, RAINN, it stands for Rape, Abuse, Incest National Network. It's rainn.org, completely free. You can text with them 24 hours a day. You can email with them 24 hours a day. You can call them. All of it's free. And it's a national network. And so, I mean, I just have thought so many times, imagine if I could have been on a cell phone texting with somebody, at least getting it off my soul. This is what's happening to me. And so there's counselors there, there's crisis workers there, and it's all free, whether you want to text, email, call them, whatever you want to do. And so you can begin to let that pain out of your heart and soul and start processing through it. And then they can also make referrals to you for ongoing counseling if you want that too. I mean, there are a million crisis hotlines that you can call. There are just not a million, but numerous crisis hotlines you can call and speak about it.
Yes, and we ran the National Suicide Hotline there a few moments ago, as well as the domestic abuse, and you can certainly reach out. That is confidential, folks. But I think that it's an important factor to, you know, if you're being moved by this discussion this evening, a key factor, and you said that, Kelley, is to take action, and so that is to reach out and ask for help, wouldn't it be?
Right. I mean, being able, it doesn't have to even be anybody you know. I mean, I know I couldn't have healed if certain people in my family were still alive. So, I mean, it just wouldn't have happened. I would have never disclosed if certain people in my family were still alive. So there's a time for everything. And everybody has a different situation, and they may not want the backlash that would come from confronting everybody. Like, everybody has their own way to heal, but you can talk to these people anonymously, and you can begin to process some things that no one in your immediate social circle has to know, but you can begin to work through it, and you can begin to have an outlet for that pain. And that's how somebody starts to heal.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful and inspiring. It's really awesome. I'd like for you to share what is your greatest strength, Kelley, and share that with the viewers.
It would be easy for me to say my faith. My faith, without a doubt, my greatest strength, but I'll go beyond that because I know people are like, okay, yeah, other than your faith. I think it would be my resiliency, just a staunch refusal to stay down. Like, I get down like anybody else. I have gone through a lot of obstacles in my life and fighting to find my way to the light. And so that's why I say today I'm a weapon against the darkness. And, you know, I want to reach every person I can to let them know you are not what was done to you. You are not what was said to you. And you can heal, and you can grow, and you can bloom, and you can find the peace that you always deserved. I end my book with a quote from someone else that just says, you know, maybe, I mean, it's kind of long, so, and I don't have it here with me, but it just says, maybe
Wait,
what we
go ahead and read it. No, that's fine.
I don't have it with me.
Okay, that's okay. Okay.
So I should have it out here, but
you can get the book. I did see a message in there somewhere with the you can actually get the book on the .com of the book's name. Is that not correct?
Correct. You have prettyface.com is my website, and I sign the copies ordered from my website. I'm currently sold out. I will say that because of when it hit #1, I sold out, but I have a shipment coming, and they emailed me today and said it has shipped and it's on the way. So hopefully I'll have that in a couple of days. But yes, but I end it with, at the end, it just says that, you know, maybe it's about unbecoming everything that we never were in the first place. Like, it's about unlearning everything that we never were and becoming who we were meant to be in the first place. And so, you know, that's not exact wording, but basically that's the idea that we, as children, many times who have been through difficult things, it's a Y in the road, and we veer off and we become something that we were never meant to be. So unlearning who we were never meant to be. It says, like, maybe the journey isn't about learning anything. Maybe it's about unlearning everything that we were never meant to be, so we could be who we were meant to be in the first place. And so I think that's the same thing with sadness. You know, you can get stuck in a state of sadness, and you have to train your mind to be like, I'm going to look for my blessings. I'm also a big believer in the law of attraction, and that our thoughts are powerful, and what we think and what we write and what we say has energy and is powerful. And Albert Einstein is my hero. I love that guy. I was born on his birthday, so like I've always been obsessed with him. And I have a quote. I begin every chapter of the book with a quote, and I have a chapter that begins with a quote from him where he says, imagination is the preview or the coming attractions for life. And, that's what our imagination is. And I think we have to be able to dream it and see it in our mind. And then we start taking actions to make it happen.
That's excellent. Excellent advice. I want to thank you so very much for being with us and sharing and get such an inspirational story and some great advice. We want to thank all the viewers for watching this evening. We want you to come back. We do the town hall get to know every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I would love to have you come back in the future.
Of course.
And yeah, I would love to have you come back. You're so awesome. I really appreciate you. You've got great spirit and your love of God and the law of attraction. We want to talk about that next time for sure.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thanks everybody for joining, and stay tuned for a message from our sponsors. We appreciate them because they help bring programs like tonight to you. Thanks. Appreciate you. We'll see you on Wednesday. Thank you.
We let our bathtub go too long. It had rust in it, it had deep pitting in it, there were chips. I, quite frankly, thought it was unrepairable.
Total Coatings is a family-owned and operated bathtub and shower refinishing company. We've been around since 2006, but we use a exclusive non-toxic porcelain coating that was developed over 60 years ago by a franchise in California. So the product is very well established. We refinish bathtubs, showers, wall tile, countertops, and even sinks. Customers want to know what makes our product different, and that's, of course, the exclusive non-toxic porcelain. We also don't acid etch the surface, so you don't have to leave your home because of noxious fumes.
I was completely and utterly shocked. It looked like a brand new bathtub. I would recommend Total Coatings to anybody.